in his possession, and he didn't want to give it to one of us because of what it was, I'm sure he would have given it to his brother to sort out.
I pressurised that man, and I asked him question after question after question, and Tony would never, ever give me an answer.
I think he's possibly covering up something, but I really do not think over the last 9 months, seeing him in the different moods we've seen him with his wife, in his home, that he could have sustained it all this time.
But those of us who tend to be a little less critical of Mike Barrett are those of us who've met him.
Michael Barrett I have never met. I've only heard what people have said. He can be telling every word of the truth, but a man he drank with in a pub gave it to him and said, you might find this interesting. It's not good enough.
And I bet you cut this question. Since this has all happened, everybody, that's the Times, okay, Australian press, CBS and your own company, okay, have all tried to break me, and have all tried to change my story.
Unless he can prove he got it off my father, I know we can't stop him, but unless he can say, well, you know, here's the proof, well, we don't think he should be using my dad's name.
I'll never change my story, because when you're telling the truth, you're telling the truth.
If the author of the diary was to be believed, he was being driven by a pathological hatred towards someone he constantly referred to as the whore, or the bitch. Later, she would sometimes be called Florrie, and even more affectionately, Bunny. This could have been his wife, as the writer also talks about the children, Bobo and Gladys. The diary also revealed a neurotic personality that fed off the extremes of love and hate, life and death. It painted a portrait of a man both tortured and thrilled by visions of his wife sleeping with the whoremaster.
So, for example, at the beginning of the account that survived, we certainly see him being very angry at his wife and being very angry at her lover and wanting to harm them, but then realizing he can't harm them, and at least not directly, for fear of being caught. And then one sees the object shift so that it becomes the prostitutes. All whores then become the aim and the object for his vengeance. And the nice thing about the diary is you can actually see that motive change.
The diary revealed an incomplete portrait of a man caught between two worlds. A respectable middle-class Victorian father, husband and businessman on the one hand, and a deranged psychopath seeking bloody revenge and sexual gratification on the other. And as for his actual identity, the answer would turn out to be one of the most remarkable elements of the entire mystery. On July the 31st, 1889, at St. George's Hall, Liverpool, Florence Elizabeth Maybrick, wife of James Maybrick, a well-respected Liverpool cotton merchant, pleaded not guilty to her husband's murder following his untimely death from suspected arsenic poisoning. The trial turned the pretty 25-year-old into an international celebrity. But the fact that she had confessed to an affair with one of her husband's friends, Alfred Brierley, did nothing to aid her defense.
James Maybrick met Florence Chandler, as she was, on board ship coming back from America. He worked in America. And she was then 18, very pretty, lively, Southern American belle, and he was aging, pushing 50, and very aware of his declining years. She was a great catch. He continued with his womanizing, there's no doubt about that, all the time they were married. She refused to sleep with him anymore, and that was the crunch, really. He began to turn against her, and the marriage broke down completely. And by this time, his lifelong habit of taking arsenic and strychnine had really wiped him out.
If the diary is to be believed, James Maybrick's habit of taking arsenic was fueling an already tormented mind.
I cannot live without my medicine. I'm sure I can take more than any person alive.
But how accurate was this portrait of Victorian drug abuse?
The nice thing about the journal, in terms of the way it talks about his use of medicine, first of all, he never actually calls it arsenic in the journal. He always refers to it as his medicine. arsenic itself was a very mild stimulant, and it was an aphrodisiac. Wasn't really used in the way, for example, say cocaine might be used to get a high there and then, to be used as a major stimulant. And the journal reflects that. The journal doesn't actually have the individual who's writing it using it as a major stimulant in the way, for example, cocaine may be used. It's being used in a much more subtle way, much more akin to the way that arsenic might have been used.
A week after the trial began, James Maybrick's young widow was found guilty of his murder and sentenced to hang. On the surface, the trial of Florence Maybrick would appear to have little in common with the events in Whitechapel, London the previous autumn. But there was no doubt that the diary was supposed to have been written by Florence's husband James. Apart from anything else, the Maybricks' family home in Liverpool was known as Battle Crease.
I believe the Maybricks moved in at the beginning of 1888, and I have the deeds of the house, but of course there's no reference made to them in the deeds because they rented the property, and then following her trial in 1889, the Maybricks moved out again. This in fact was his bedroom, I believe. His bed was over in the corner there, and off this room was his dressing room, and next door to that his study. Well, the electrics have always been a bit of a problem since I moved in, and I decided to have a total rewire, and they've fitted a new main to the flat in 1989, I think. And then over a 3-year period I had storage radiators fitted, and I had a ring main installed in the flat.
The floorboards in James Maybrick's study had been lifted for the first time in over a century, just prior to the diary coming to light. According to the Times newspaper, the electricians denied finding anything at the house at this time, although 2 of them did admit to drinking at the same public house as Tony Devereux and Mike Barrett. In Liverpool, the Daily Post newspaper had been the first to become aware of the existence of the Ripper diary, and the closely guarded secret of the author's identity. They too had expected to reveal a hoax.
The first I heard about it was a phone call from a journalist colleague of mine back in April, telling me that on a train journey from Liverpool to London, he had met a man who had the diary of Jack the Ripper. We ran that story in the Daily Post the next day. I thought if somebody's bringing out a book of James Maybrick saying Maybrick is a killer, I thought, well, it's a hoax. It's a hoax.
This piece of scientific apparatus was devised by us in the early stages to try and assess as we were going along what we thought was the likely truth, if you like, about the journal, about the whole affair, the Ripperometer. And as you can see now, it's pointing more towards the truth. I've really been outvoted by my 2 colleagues. I'm still rather sceptical.
My gut instinct, perhaps it's feminine intuition or something, but my gut instinct tells me it's true. It is. We've got the man.
It appeared to be a hoax. It's a pretty incredible tale, isn't it? I got the diary of a man I met in a pub. I mean, who would believe that on the surface? So it's been one-sided. Since the confidentiality agreement has come out, the other side of it is now beginning to be heard. I mean, I've had a chance for the Daily Post to read the diary, and actually I've actually seen it. It's a strange feeling to pick up this old battered ledger and say, well, I wonder if this is true. It's a strange feeling altogether. If it is a hoax, it's the most fantastic piece of work. It doesn't read like a diary at all. In fact, it isn't a diary. It's more like there's no dates in it, there's no names. It doesn't name James Maybrick, it doesn't name the Maybrick family by name at all in it. It drops clues. In fact, if you read it and you didn't know the Maybrick case, you wouldn't know that Maybrick is involved in it. It's a strange hoax if it is a hoax.
We've got a mysterious document which turns up by somebody who takes it in a very amateurish way to the market, apparently coming from a man who's dead and whose family knew nothing whatever about it. Oh dear, oh dear.
And I don't care a damn what anybody says. Everybody is going to come at me and tell me, is it a forgery? Is it this? Is it that? I've got no answers whatsoever. I just don't know.